Do listen up, and then after that we will we'll serve some food and hear from more of our guests. Patrick, come on up.
Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here today.
Hello, test.
All right, there we go. It's an honor and privilege to be here today. I can also read the room. I know everybody's hungry, so I'm going to keep it fairly short. But anyways, for me, this is a special full circle moment because 16 years ago, I was here and I found the rusted old sign. It was rusted then, got a paint job. But I was here with the battalion commander I was with in Fallujah. And it's a special thing when you go to battle with somebody and you walk the hallowed ground with them. And for me, it's a miracle that I was on the stage live. I was a combat historian with 3-1. And we saw some really hard combat. The book I wrote on that, it's called We Were One. It's about 8 best friends and only 3 survived. It's on 3 Commandant's reading, professional reading list, required reading. But that day, we met at Greenwood Cemetery and we walked down the alleys of Brooklyn. We went up to Greenwood Cemetery where they first did battle, then came down here, found the rusted old sign, and I looked up and saw 256 Continental Soldier Maryland heroes. And I said to myself, where are they buried and what is their story? Nobody had written a book about it at that time, and I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what the story was behind that sign and who those men were. And that story begins on a wintry day in 1774, where men of honor, family, and fortune came together to form the Baltimore Independent Cadets, or the first Baltimore Independent Company. They wanted to defend their fellow colonies at 48 hours notice. They put their fortunes on the line. The best money, the equipment that they could buy and training, they trained for months. But their first combat would be here in Brooklyn. On August 26th, last night, 250 years ago, the battle begins outside of the Western Gate at Greenwood Cemetery at the Red Line Inn at that time, where British scouts were probing the American lines, and they came across the watermelon patch behind the Red Line Inn. And the first shots were fired by Edward Hand's riflemen. They repelled the scouts, and then the Battle of Brooklyn unfolds. The bulk of Washington's army is out on the Kiwanis Heights, Greenwood Cemetery location, but what was going on was a giant flanking maneuver. There were 4 passes. The 4th pass was only guarded by 5 horsemen. They were quickly apprehended, and Lord Howe and Henry Clinton went through the Jamaica Pass in a giant flanking maneuver. And it was at this point in the morning that Mordecai Gist of the Maryland 400, who was the major at the time, the second in command, is rousted by the shots that are fired. And they move towards Greenwood Cemetery, Lord Sterling, and all the men. And it's here that they do battle with General Grant and his 4,000 men. And they hold their ground at Greenwood Cemetery. But for hours, Cornwallis's group and Howe's group are going through Jamaica Pass and flanking the American position. And it's here, to their utter horror, that they realize that they are being surrounded, and they have to fight their way back to the Stone House, which is a few blocks down the road. And it's here that they do battle. They have to fight in files. Their companies are separated, and it's utter chaos. And it's here that the American Revolution is at a pivotal point where all can be lost. The British have overwhelming force, and if they are able to attack the fortifications in Brooklyn Heights with the combined wings of their armies, they can destroy Washington's army right then and there, potentially capture Washington and end the Revolutionary War. But here, Lord Sterling gathers 5 companies of Marylanders, and they make an epic series of bayonet charges at the Stone House that is occupied by Cornwallis. This rear guard action allows the bulk of the American army to flee and escape through Kiwanis Creek in the milk pond and get to the safety of the American lines, the perceived safety. Because what happens is it's an hour more precious in our history than any other, as a contemporary historian would say. They bought time, precious daylight, because it would be very difficult for the British to mount a night attack, even with their experienced army. But that stand will save the United States and the Army. But they are not safe, because the Army is surrounded by 20,000 men in its front. The Royal Navy occupies New York Harbor. The East River separates Brooklyn from Manhattan in safety. And it's here that there's a massive nor'easter that pelts both armies as Lord Howe digs in and conducts siege lines. But Washington has to decide what to do, fight or retreat. At the Four Chimneys, which is a mansion in Brooklyn, he gathers his men for a council of war, and they advise that he withdraw. But that is one of the most impossible and difficult operations in military operations, is to escape from an enemy that's in front when they also control the river and the waterways. And it falls upon the shoulders of John Glover and the Marblehead Mariners to gather all of the boats on August 29th to conduct a miracle. And with only hours to spare, they bring the boats together. They're told initially that they are going to attack the British lines because they know that secrecy is a must. A single person that blows the operation, the British will pounce. And that night, nothing is working for the Marblehead Mariners. The tides are wrong, the wind is wrong, but somehow they keep going. They try to find Washington to call off the operation. It fails. They can't find him, and it pushes forward. The tides change, but it's a race against time to somehow save the army, because dawn is coming. They have to make 12 trips back and forth against this raging torrent, the East River. But dawn is coming, and it's at this point that a providential fog sets in and screens the movement of all of the boats. And they were able to bring off the army to safety. And that is just the beginning for the Marylanders, the Marbleheaders, and the Riflemen of an 8-year-long war. These men will fight in both the North and the South. The Marylanders will fight 8 years of war, and they will help win the American Revolution in the South. One soldier that was with them had a diary that recorded every day's march. From 1780 to 1783, he recorded 5,000 miles on foot of marching and fighting, and somehow surviving. But that's about the spirit of these men. They were fighting for liberty and freedom, for an idea. And that's why it all matters, because they saved our country that day, and it's these founding principles which will save our country now. It's time to bring the 400 home. Thank you very much.